So some years ago, I was in a nightclub in North London, and I was looking for the bathroom, and I went through a door, and it was not the bathroom, it was a band and some people hanging out, and I started talking to them, and one of them ran a newspaper, and then she said, "Have you ever thought about writing?" And I was like, "Well, no, but I guess I should." So I started writing music reviews for her and her newspaper, and I thought this was really good, and I'd like to be a writer, so I was trying to figure out a path to do it. I was writing for people, but I was getting no feedback, and I certainly wasn't getting paid. So I interned at a few places, like a major music magazine called Kerrang. I did the writing test for them, and they said I wasn't good enough to write for them. I did not know what to do next. How does one go from wanting to be a writer to being paid to be a writer? And this was the original problem I set out to fix with Planet Ivy. So what do we do in a nutshell? We find great writers, we create great content, we release it on social media, receive traffic to our sites, and we make money. That's the essentials of it. So we run two sites right now, Planet Ivy and Screen Robot. This is Planet Ivy, our first site. It's essentially news aimed at 18 to 25-year-olds. This is Screen Robot, the second site. This is film and gaming articles without any news or interviews or reviews. It's purely opinion and features which are very discussable on social media. So we've produced over 4,000 articles in the last year and a half, high quality written content. We've been republished in the likes of The Guardian, sourced in the likes of Daily Mail, Yahoo, MSN, Gawker, BuzzFeed, Inquisitor. All our writers are writing in order to further their own careers. So these are the sort of articles that we've produced which have become viral hits. So some are serious, some are not serious. So we like to give people stories that they may not find elsewhere, and headlines are the key to that in order to make things go viral. So what we've done so far is build a social following, which means we have truly organic traffic, which we don't have to pay for. We've been retweeted by the likes of WikiLeaks, MTV, Darren Brown, and many other names. We've had investment of 150,000 and are looking for further investment right now. We've had over 1 million page views for a single article. That number was a bit lower, it's like a month ago. We generally get 2 million page views a month, last few months. And what this means is we've grown faster than BuzzFeed and Huffington Post, and we're neck and neck with Business Insider. So because of this, brands want to advertise on our platform because we reach a very specific market. So we've got brand direct deals with the likes of American Apparel. We work with major ad agencies like Vice. We've been offered worldwide ad contracts by AOL and WPP. So why does this matter? Because content is changing everything. People like BuzzFeed are absolutely killing it, not just in page views, but they're massively profitable and growing. The reason they can do this is because lowbrow pays for highbrow content. So you really have to think beyond cats with BuzzFeed. All of those page views that lead to all of those advertorials pays for some really serious and excellent long-form journalism. The Huffington Post has built its model on lots and lots of unpaid writers, but has maintained a high level of quality. And Forbes is a mixture of paid and unpaid, and is still seen as an extremely reputable name. The current thought leaders are Upworthy. They attempt to disseminate all their content through Facebook, as you probably know. And their key USP is the best headlines that are the most clickable anywhere on the internet. So we use Bitly right now. This enables you to track every link that you disseminate on social media, the number of clicks, where in the world people clicked them, which titles worked and which titles didn't work. Bitly is free, and it enables you to statistically test every content title, and it allows you to measure results across the month. So this is an example of the dashboard for Bitly. Also, Buffer is what we use in order to make sure that our social media is active throughout the day. So you choose the times that you want to release, and then you can just buffer up posts throughout the day on all of your accounts at once. So this again shows the number of clicks and the time of day it was released, so you can use that data in order to get better. So, how do things go viral? The key is not to guess. You should know your niche inside out before you begin. So in our case, our readers love film, and our readers are quite young. So they were growing up in the 90s, so an article on Buffy the Vampire Slayer would go down quite well. So we started the viral spiral. In the end, this article has been shared over 10,000 times so far, including Sarah Michelle Gellar herself. You have to find the key influencers in your market and make sure the content reaches them, as it did here. So, as a publisher, I don't know how relevant this is to other companies, but you need to make sure your server can handle the spikes in traffic. So ours can handle up to 10,000 concurrent users before we have to spin up another server, which is also important. And next, we talk about content itself. So many content publishers just aggregate or wrap a small amount of text around an existing idea, but we create content. We like to think that 18 to 25-year-olds are the perfect people to write exciting, engaging content. So the way they do it is they create it for us. We mentor them, we give them a platform to be heard on, and we pay them when their work goes viral. So taking on less writers is a good idea, if you have that many applications as we do. We have a 20-second rule regarding applications. So we've had a lot of people on our sites, and because of the freedom we offer them, it gives them a much better chance of producing the content they want to, rather than the content that we make them, so to speak. Our system wouldn't work if we were giving out assignments all the time for people to write about things they didn't want to write about. We're not a copywriting agency. We want exciting content from people who want to write it. So these are our writers. They're very young. This isn't their only job. They're all around the country, and they're fairly unreliable. So there's many ways you could manage writers. We actually use a combination of things, but all of them are based around Google Docs, which is free and anyone can use. We set up an ideas board where they can dip in and be inspired to write an article on certain topics which are current. We have interview and content documents so that they can learn the basics of writing, which many of them need. And we have article ideas that are taken, and once they're taken, others can't see them, but there's a general database that everyone can see. So this is our online newsroom. This enables anyone to sign in, see if there's anything on the newsroom, see if there's anything they want to write on any given day. So we have between 300 to 500 contributors, but it wouldn't work if we were trying to give every single person assignments at all times. We have this board, and if they see anything that they like, they just pop in, and maybe we'll do a version of it that they believe that they can do the best. So we like to come into content from a slightly different angle. We believe the article begins before it's written. Is the idea good enough, or is the idea dead on arrival? Plenty of people write content without thinking about the end user. The worst example of this is people who write books before they consider how it can be marketed and who the target market are. That can take 6 months of wasted time. So we send back articles if they need more work. So here are some ideas that have been pitched to us that worked really well that we wouldn't have thought of. So generally, these are our golden rules. Don't do anything that other people can do better, which is one reason we don't do as much news, reviews, or interviews within our niche. Other people can go to bigger sites and get them better, so it's completely useless to try and challenge people and expect people to come to your site. This is what we do, an idea that's been explored. So this article has now received, I think, 500,000 page views, as it's a really hot topic. We've been accused of being hipster bait because our titles are so discussable. Is that a word? So yeah, our second rule is don't publish anything boring. So ideally, it's like one person talking to another person in the pub, but a young person. So the question is why? Why do people write for free? Well, the first reason is the traditional routes for getting into publishing were going to work for a local newspaper or an internship with essentially a guaranteed job at the end of it. Now the local newspapers are dying very quickly, and internships are not leading to jobs as much as they used to. So the other option is to get a master's degree, but that doesn't help you get noticed in any way. So we solve these problems. Writers who have no ideas, they don't know if they're any good, they need experience, and they think that no one reads their blog. If you write 9 blog posts and you get not a single comment, you're going to give up writing. We give them a platform so that they are more likely to get social shares, more likely to get feedback. Our editors give them feedback to try and make them better writers. Our editors will say, go and get a quote for this, please redo the intro. So we provide ideas, inspiration, and provide them with part of their portfolio. So increasing people's readership is really great. So we once had someone who wrote an article that got 5,000 page views within 2 hours. And previous to that, his record was 25 page views in a month on his personal blog. So when we see that for a writer, it's really exciting for us. So we do an anonymous writer feedback once every month. And this is one quote from someone who has worked with us. Your creative voice isn't stifled, and if anything, you're encouraged to have strong, even controversial opinions. By not forcing our writers to have a house style like most publications, they're freer and can generally produce work that works a lot better on social media. So the key difference between us and the likes of Huffington Post and Medium or running your own blog is you can get paid with us. So not everyone can get paid because we have 500 writers, and the best ones deserve to be paid so that they carry on writing and can start to build a portfolio and to get paid. So they get rewarded, we don't go bankrupt. Success. So these are the main 3 sites we're working on right now. So Planet Ivy, it took us a year to get to 1 million page views a month. Screen Robot, it took only 4 months. And next month we're launching Coming to Land, which is our fashion vertical. The next 3 verticals we're going to do are fashion, music, and books, which is really exciting for us as we continue to drive into the 18 to 25 demographic. And in a nutshell, young people are the key to viral content. They understand the internet better than anyone, and they should be writing your content. Thanks.
Does anyone ask questions? Because I have one.
Yeah, sure.
How do you identify what is the trendy subjects to be published? Do you have any kind of technology behind that to actually scroll the internet and find like keywords that appears like before it's even a trendy subject?
We're starting to experiment with monitoring rising search trends, but essentially Reddit and Twitter are the public spaces that we monitor in order to find out what's trending. So a lot of our ideas come from our writers coming to us with ideas, though.
Okay, and how many of your contributors have been paid right now?
The number of writers we pay has increased every month since we introduced the scheme in September.
Okay.
So our long-term goal is to build a platform where anyone can create their own online magazine, can use our pool of writers to build it, and can then use our reach into brands in order to monetize it.
Okay.
So rather than using AdWords to monetize your blog, we have reached with loads of agencies and loads of brands in lots of niches, so you could earn a lot more money by being on the platform we're building right now.
Okay. Have any of your writers actually made a lot of money by writing for your site?
The best ones leave, and that's a really good situation for us. So the best ones have gone to places like Time Out, The Independent. One of our writers has joined Vice and has just been flown out to Guatemala to do a piece for them. So ideally we're a launching pad, and if they continue to write for us after that, that's great. But we see ourselves as a place where writers get better. But in terms of full-time work, yes, 5 members of staff started as writers and are now pretty much full-time.
So internships are either expenses paid or totally unpaid. And if people come to your site, again, there's no guarantee of pay, and there's no guarantee. It's the same thing, internship may or may not lead to a job. So coming or writing for your site may or may not lead to being noticed as much. So how do your writers feel motivated to write? To start with you?
So, firstly, it's heavily skewed to help them rather than to help us. We're not profitable right now. So the 3 reasons they write for us are they get feedback, they get better at writing, they get a platform to be heard on, which they can build their portfolio with, and the opportunity to get paid if they go viral. In reply to internships, internships are illegal if they're doing business essential tasks. The only interns we have in are writers. So they can either write from home or they can come in and sit next to an editor and get feedback in that way. So the only interns we have are people who come into the office. They're less than 1% of our entire writer base comes into the office. Everyone else is paid.
If you're not profitable, you have yourself to support. So how do you see yourself making money on this project?
We are working on our revenue streams right now, and we are looking for a second round of investment right now. But if we were to try and be profitable from day one, you would see 10 ads on the page, door slams. We wouldn't be able to do some of the things we do. We see ourselves as a tech startup that just happens to be in the publishing space. So it's traditional for tech startups to raise investment, build something people actually want, and then monetize later. We're currently earning £5,000 a month revenue, but that doesn't quite cover all our costs.
Are you thinking of working with people like Outbrain to monitor your traffic or things like that?
Yes, we use similar traffic drivers to Outbrain. Zergnet actually drives more traffic than Outbrain. We're currently trialing Hexagram.
Which one did you say?
Zergnet. It's American traffic only, but it's 3 times the return of what you send them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm gonna switch.
I like that. Cool. So the platform I'd like to introduce to you is called the News Hub. We're launching in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. The basic idea behind the News Hub really formed in my head over a number of years as I watched the news industry's increasing struggles to adapt to the internet age. A struggle really seen from 2 key perspectives. Firstly, they've been failing as businesses. Most news titles lose money. But I also think there's been an industry-wide failure, really, to capitalize on digital technologies. News should be far more powerful now than it ever was in print, and yet nobody's really changed the news experience. I think that's a massive missed opportunity. If you take a snapshot of news today, it's riddled with problems. The copy from centralized news teams is slow in digital terms. Twitter has become the front line of news. There have been widespread journalist redundancies. And the core problem we're trying to solve, is that nobody's really worked out a business model that works. They haven't worked out how to offer content for free, pay journalists, and make a profit. In fact, as a last-ditch attempt to save themselves, you've probably noticed over the last few years a lot of paywalls going up. I think that, this isn't going to work in the medium or long term because the internet generation hasn't paid for news, and they're not going to start paying for news on sufficient scale. Only a couple of titles, principally business titles like the FT and the Wall Street Journal, will be able to make it work. There's also been a huge shift in user habits. Previously, there used to be brand loyalty. Your parents, your grandparents, they buy a particular paper every single day. That doesn't exist anymore. People jump from free platform to free platform. They want to get diverse sources of content. This is obviously not great for publishers because you've lost the stickiness of your readers, but it's not great for users either because it's very inefficient having to do all this jumping. I also think one of the awesome things, although some journalists might disagree, about the internet age is that people have an opinion and can share it. You all right? Oh, sorry, I thought you wanted... If anybody wants to ask a question, you can just jump in. You can share it. But news sites really aren't built for this. They were built when content really was produced by the producer and delivered to the consumer. There wasn't that sense of communication. The problem is that users like to have a say, and yet on news stories you often see that comments have been disabled. There's also, I think, been just a massive failure to capitalize on what digital can do for pure user experience. When news started to go online, existing titles just took their print editions and put them online. They didn't make them interactive, they didn't make them social. It's a huge missed opportunity. And the same goes for content curation. It still blows my mind that anyone in here will go on The Guardian, The New York Times, and we all see the same headlines, even though we've got different interests. And of course, aggregators have sprung up, by the bucket load over the last 10 years, but they still don't solve the fundamental problem of how you pay for the original content in the first place. And finally, there's no truly global news platform. Every existing title has a national or local focus. I include the BBC within that because it's obviously seen as distinctly British. So the News Hub solutions are pretty much the inverse. All the content is produced by users, whether you're a professional journalist with decades of experience writing a few times a day, or you see a bomb go off, take a photo, and put it on the News Hub. And that means we can be reactive in real time. I'll come to quality control in a few slides. We're also going to offer performance-related pay. To begin with, we're going to pay for the top 10% of content per category per calendar month. We work that out using page views and upvotes. But the key thing I want to stress is that unlike typical performance models, we're not rewarding pure popularity. We're rewarding the perception of quality. We don't want to be in a position where, a photo of Kim Kardashian on the beach merits a lot more payment than a piece of political analysis about Ukraine. And we've got various systems to do that. The key thing that I should probably point out is that we compare content per category. So Kim Kardashian, if you write something on that, you're competing for payment in the celebrity category. Whereas if you write a piece of political analysis, you're not going to be competing with that very popular piece. You're competing against other political pieces. We also pay flat fees across the board. So even though Kim might get 1 million page views, if that story's in the top 10%, it will earn exactly the same fee as you will for putting something in the politics category that might only get 300 page views, so long as it's in the top 10%. Because we've got this open publishing model where anyone can publish content, it means that we can support new revenue streams that traditional titles can't. Because we don't have because we don't have a newsroom on salary, it also means our fixed costs are about 5% of a typical news platform. It means a whole new business model for news that offers really a sustainable model for professional journalism that's also free to access. It's one central platform with content from diverse sources. Users can comment and contribute freely. We're really trying to promote discussion on a current affairs site rather than on a social site next to pictures of your pets and what you ate in the morning. A highly interactive user experience as well. We're going to have polls, petitions, debates. It's also very personal. As a user, you can follow the journalists you like, which allows you to vet your content sources to a certain extent. You also can select your filters. So if you're into more highbrow content, if you will, you might say you're into politics and business, but not style and celebrity. And that affects what appears in your feed. You have one feed tailored to you. And finally, there's no geographic focus. The whole point of the News Hub is it's an impartial framework, can be expanded to any country in the world. So there's a couple of other areas which I think are really exciting, in which the News Hub will add value, which isn't necessarily problem solving. It's an opportunity for people who are close to news stories, protagonists as I like to call them, to share it. So you might have just survived a plane crash and want to explain the chain of events inside the cabin. Or you might have been implicated in a political scandal and want to clear your name. Obviously that's very interesting for users because it's information from protagonists as well as journalists. It's obviously a massive opportunity for young journalists to start building their portfolios, to start earning money. And it's a huge opportunity for bloggers. I mean, this comes back to what Vincent was saying earlier. As a blogger, you get into it because you want to be a writer or, write personally and write about something you care about. But actually, when you come round to it, you've got to set up the blog, you've got to design it to a certain extent, you've got to market it, you've got to monetize it, and you might not actually get any views out of it. On the News Hub, it's all set to go. You start writing, you benefit from the network effect of all your content being next to this other content, and you can get paid. And finally, I think it's an awesome opportunity for established journalists because we're offering complete editorial freedom. When I was a freelancer, probably about 90% of the content I wrote about was, I just couldn't have cared less about it. And that was purely to make ends meet. On the News Hub, you write about what you care about, If it resonates with the community, you get paid. It's an alternative to traditional media, very important, when there are things like the phone hacking scandal. And also, and this might be the most valuable thing about it, it aims to bring order to the noise that surrounds massive stories. So when a story like Mandela's death or the NSA scandal breaks, there's so much content splurged online, it's very difficult to follow. I include Twitter within that. On the News Hub, we'll host a dedicated feed to that topic, which will make it very easy to see. Derived from established social principles. So you just have one feed tailored to you that scrolls continuously. You've got your content filters here, where you select what you're into, and there are two core tabs. Latest, it's chronological, and trending. Trending is all about relevance to you. This brings me on to quality control. As I mentioned, you can follow the journalists you like, so that's obviously an important element. We've also got a voting system directly derived from Reddit. Ensures the best content, by and large, makes its way to the top of your feed, while the worst descends to the bottom. If something gets too many downvotes, it's actually compacted and made invisible. Users can also report offensive content, incorrect content, and so on and so forth. And that's for our in-house moderation team to remove. The whole point is this is a free market for news. People will still put up low-quality content. And that's going to happen just like it does on Twitter, on Wikipedia, Reddit, and so on and so forth. But the whole idea is that we're going to provide prominence to the best content, the best contributors. I would have showed you as well some of our uploader, but unfortunately that's not working today. But that's the crux of what the News Hub is like to operate. I want to tell you a bit more about our market position. So this doesn't just show the market position of the News Hub, it shows how we're different. When people ask me how we're different, it really depends what you're comparing us to. Difference with the traditional news title, I think, is quite obvious. Difference with an aggregator, most of our content's original. Difference with a citizen journalism title is we pay. Difference with a social platform like Twitter is we're dedicated to news, not limited by characters, we pay, so on and so forth. But at the same time, we're trying to take established features, bring them together in one platform, and then optimize them just for current affairs. Now, I was going to talk a lot about the growth strategy, but actually I'm just going to focus on a few points. The key one is that in order to grow, we have to focus on attracting contributors first. If there's no content, there's going to be no users. So the outreach has begun, and we've had an amazing response from the journalism community. About 80% of respondents say they'd like to write for us, which is fantastic. We've got over 250 journalists and bloggers on board. And I think one of the key things is that we're going to pay journalists through revenue share, but we're not going to be making any revenue to begin with. So we're offering a nominal fee instead of $10 for every piece of content in the top 10%. Now, we realize that's not life-changing money, but the point is to show we'll pay for good content right from the start. And that's just the starting point. Within a few years, once our business model is fully established, we expect to pay journalists better than ever before. The other key thing that I want to talk about is that we're going to focus on particular topics, which might interest you potentially as contributors. So we're not going to be able to cover all of those things well, so we're going to focus on politics and football, and within them we're going to focus on Scottish independence and the World Cup. I think Scottish independence is a perfect example of what the News Hub's all about, because that debate is currently happening very much in the established press and amongst governments, really. We're going to open that up to the people and say, have you got something to say about this? We're going to reach out to people on both sides of the border, on both sides of the debate. We're actually going to host formal debates about it and allow people to engage with what is a very important social, political, and economic issue on a neutral current affairs platform. The final thing to say, I suppose, is that there's a great team around me, and one of them actually is the guy who's in charge of SEO. He was formerly the head of SEO and analytics for Unidad Editorial, so he was head of Marca, El Mundo, all those big titles, and he'll be helping out. So the business model is obviously the crux of this. Now, the News Hub has 3 revenue streams. The smallest of them is display advertising. I mean, one of the reasons why news is in the mire is because display is just such a poor moneymaker. The News Hub has 2 other revenue streams, which I'm afraid I'm going to keep confidential because we haven't actually launched yet, and it's obviously a USP. But I wanted to talk a bit about the thinking behind them. First of all, you've got a question, would you have a paywall? And actually, I think there's quite a clear answer to this in today's age, and that's no. I think that it's incredibly difficult to launch a title and get people to pay for what is essentially an unknown entity. And I think the experience of Matter was a classic example. I mean, they had a fantastic Kickstarter campaign. They raised 3 times as much as they were aiming for, awesome celebrity endorsements, but they couldn't actually make it work when it came to the crunch. So I think you've got to start from the basis that you've got to offer content for free. So you've got to look at value creation in other areas. What assets does your company, what can your publication possibly provide? Obviously, you've got the writers themselves. Maybe you can offer their services as copywriters. It's not something I'd want to do, and I'm sure it's not something most publications want to do. But it's just an example. You've obviously got your audience, you've got the content, you've got the expertise of your writers. You know, potentially, if you're a travel magazine, you can sell some of these tips to the concierge of the Four Seasons. Again, I think that's actually a pretty bad idea, but it's meant to just show an example of the way I think that any new publisher should be thinking about their business. And Sumley actually is an amazing example, the 17-year-old kid who ended up selling his business to Yahoo for 30 million. That was based on the technology that he had. It's obviously very difficult to build a publishing business for technology, but he managed to do it anyway. Of course, once you've identified what you're going to be selling, it's important to know who you're going to be selling to. And I think BuzzFeed is a really interesting case because one of the services they offer is other news publishers approach them with their own content and say, how do we make this go viral? They take it and then they viralize it, for want of a better word. The last people I'd want to be selling to in this current climate is other news publishers, simply because of the financial troubles they're in. But, credit to BuzzFeed, they made it happen. And obviously, you've got to think about processes at this point. What's the most efficient way that you can do it? How will you monetize this? Are you going to outsource to a media selling agency? And so on and so forth. Because the key to this, the key to online publishing, isn't actually your revenues. It's how lean you can be. And the New York Times is a fantastic example of this because they've been slashing costs. I was reading the other day that their sales team are now having to operate some of their parts of their sales team on budgets of 0.1% of annual sales. So you're bringing in 60 million US and you've got a budget of 60,000 to sell to be able to keep your clients happy. Apparently they can't even afford sometimes to offer free copies of the New York Times anymore. And this obviously is to cut costs, because as I said, it's vital to be lean. The New York Times makes approximately 400 million US a year from its online services. That's a hell of a lot of money. The problem is their costs are about 4 times that. And that, in a nutshell, is why news is in the predicament that it's in. And that's the key thing that any publisher wants to be thinking about. You've got to get all of these elements to work together at low traffic. I remember when this was several years ago, I was thinking about creating a food website because I thought there was a gap in the market between very personal, colourful food blogs and the quite sort of grey but vast food websites which offer recipes and opinions like Epicurious, so that we could bring it together. I spent ages looking at the features of it and then eventually got around to the numbers, and I lost money every single month, even in a fictitious world. And that's because you can't obviously guarantee that you're going to hit high traffic. How's this going to operate? But I don't want this to be doom and gloom, because I think this is the most exciting age for journalism and for media that there's ever been, and that's because of the technologies that are available to us. The question is finding a model for it. And I think at the News Hub, we've managed to do that. We're going to be launching in a few weeks' time, as I mentioned. Here's some of the feedback that we've been getting at the moment. It's incredibly exciting being in my position because I can, hear from these 250 plus contributors what they think about it. We've got an awesome team, and we're very excited about getting started. So if any of you have any interest in potentially publishing, let me know.
Thank you. I had do you have a question? Yes.
You had mentioned about user-generated content. Now, YouTube is very established. If I happen to witness something, a big story, the first thing I will think about it, I will upload my video on YouTube, even though it hasn't passed editorial checks and everything. Maybe the News Hub will be at the back of my mind. So the first place someone will think about uploading a video would technically be YouTube or Twitter. So how would you motivate or try to get someone to do it on the news?
You know, that's obviously something that's gonna happen over time. You've got to enter people's minds before people actually start posting content on your site when they're in a live breaking news situation. In fact, to begin with, we think that most of our content, for that reason, will be analysis and opinion rather than breaking news from the ground. However, ultimately, we want to put ourselves in a position where you think to yourself, you're in the middle of Kiev, you're seeing some of these protests, that the first place you're going to put it is the news hub because you can actually earn money for it, and then you export, you effectively share the link via Twitter. So the thing is, Twitter is just essentially another aggregator. And of course, you can't post video itself onto Twitter. But yeah, that's part of the battle. It's becoming the first port of call for that kind of content.
So where does the money come from when you play writers? Sorry, I know.
Wow. I was saying that there's three revenue streams, which were basically, the smallest is display. That's about 5 to 10% of revenues. There's 2 other revenue streams that we're keeping under wraps for now, but it should allow us to monetize our content a lot more effectively than rivals. We can have a chat though later if you're up for it.
I have another question.
Sure.
I think writing requires a lot of talent, creativity, and hard work. And when you say that you have a flat rate of $10 per article, I mean it's okay even for a student. That technically equates to a minimum wage. Do you really think a writer deserves a minimum wage, or I think for the amount of creativity there should be some more value to it?
Well, I personally, I'm a journalist myself, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think that our aim is to pay journalists better than ever before, but we've got to get there in the first place. As I mentioned, the $10 is more of a nominal fee than anything else to show that we believe that good content is worth paying for, and within a few years we hope that we're going to be able to pay journalists better than ever before. But obviously we've got to manage our resources until we get there. And I realise for a lot of people, well, this isn't a living wage, and this isn't meant to provide you with a living wage at this point. This is meant to be a place where you post content potentially, once a week or something like that, unless you happen to, make a lot of money elsewhere and have a lot of free time.
Like for a student who wants the exposure and maybe will get maybe 2 meals in McDonald's, or maybe a meal in McDonald's with that one article, I think it's okay for a student, but then for how long do you see people would consider, okay, do I feel that this website is valuing my talent?
Well, I think what's quite extraordinary about the internet is that there are lots of websites that do this and they don't pay anything. So I think the perception of value online is very different to what it was historically. I think that, as I mentioned, we're trying to get to a point where we can pay people with actually market-leading rates. This $10 is simply the starting point.
Where does the $10 come from?
We've raised some capital.
Right, okay.
So what happens in one of the sections is underrepresented. So the articles coming in online, do you not have to pay for them? Do you still pay for the 10% which are...
Yes, we will. Obviously, we're going to try to ensure, if there are categories which are really underpopulated, then we might close those categories. But the fact is, if there's, say, only 20 articles in a very random section, that we still probably think that the top 2 articles are probably going to be worth paying for. That's something that we're going to assess on a case-by-case basis.
Now Vincent's website is also about people who want to blog, young writers, everything. His is limited to 18 to 25-year-olds. I believe you are not keeping an age gap onto your website. So other than the age, and his is more of light content, but you're going into every every beat. So he has already been in the market. You are launching. So if I am an 18 to 25-year-old, I would rather go to some place that is already existing than to go to a startup. So how do you think your company would withstand something that is already in the market?
Well, obviously it's a massive question for any young startup. I think the feedback we've had, the reaction from the community is indicative that we have got an interesting product. As I said, over 80% of respondents say they would like to write for us. And that's for numerous reasons, often actually with crossover with what Vincent said. It's freedom. You can write whatever you want, whenever you want, and hopefully get paid for it. You don't need to set anything up. And that's obviously one of the great things about the News Hub. I think Vincent's is is a fantastic model, but obviously there's that dialogue you're going to have, which offers value in some areas. On the News Hub, it's fairly instantaneous. It's an incredibly simple tool for you to start publishing.
I understand how you get the writers on board with the $10. How do you plan to get readers on the site?
I mean, that's really a direct sort of correlation from the content itself. We expect our contributors to be actually vital for that, and that's because it's performance related. So when you write a piece of content, a little pop-up set appears, saying, would you like to share this with your networks? The more votes and views you get, the better chance you have of earning money. So
most writers don't know how to use Twitter.
Sorry?
You warned, most writers don't know how to use Twitter.
Yeah, I know that is the case. Obviously, social is going to be incredibly important for us. As I mentioned, we've got an incredibly experienced and talented SEO specialist. We're already generating PR. In fact, I think that's how Neela managed to find me. Thanks for inviting me. Because I think there's a lot of interest in the industry itself for a solution to the current crisis. So I don't see coverage, hopefully, as being too hard to come by.
I think writers will want to publicize their work because if they are, if they want to write for a platform like your website or William's website, it is all about visibility. Like, for example, my cousin had a baby a couple of months ago, and she entered her baby into some popular baby contest where she put a picture and the baby with the most votes got the prize. So she shared it on my wall, all my relatives' walls, her wall, and said, please like my baby's picture, please vote. And her baby actually won. So probably, I think people would do that.
There's a reason musicians get ripped off by band managers. Creative people are not very good at marketing themselves. And it's the same with writers. SEO stuff. We need to increase our SEO.
Sorry, I might have missed that bit. So is there going to be a team of moderators when it comes to writing?
Yeah, there is going to be a team of moderators, but we moderate after publishing rather than beforehand. And that's, for a number of reasons, partly to be reactive in real time.
So are you legally responsible for content?
No, the authors are legally responsible for their content.
Even though you moderate?
Even though we moderate after the fact, because we're not vetting beforehand.
We need your lawyers. We should talk after.
We shall, but that's the key distinction at the moment between a publisher and a distributor. We count as a distributor.
Who owns the copyright?
The authors do as well. You can remove it, you can edit it, you can delete it at any time.
So in case tomorrow some company like a Guardian or something likes the content and they want to republish it, so will they have to ask you for permission, or will they contact your writer, and if they want to pay for that article, all transaction is directly to the writer and not via your website?
Yes, it would. Although our default position is that we've got a Creative Commons share alike license. We believe in a free and open internet. And so the typical default license is that people can take, other media can take our content so long as they give a reference back to the author. We personally think that, that actually gives the author a lot more oxygen and is probably going to be incredibly worthwhile. As soon as you start asking people to charge and to get in touch, that obviously greatly decreases your chance as an author of that content being shared.
What about the contributors? Actually, you had like 300 or something like that. Who are they?
We've got a really interesting mix, actually. It goes right from aspiring journalists, young students, to retired career journalists from the likes of the BBC, Channel 4 and everything like that. Obviously freelancers and bloggers. There's quite a mix. We're UK-centric, I'd say, but we've got contributors from all over the world, from Saudi to Argentina, from written journalists to videographers and various other things. No worries.
Anyone got a question? Or that's it. Okay, well, thank you very much. And it's the end. Now we have like pizza waiting. And thank you guys.
Pizza, yeah.
Pizza. Thank you guys for coming today. And I'm going to take it's the end. Thank you.
You can take my expression of love of pizza off the recording.